them probably have some plan of what they want to do and how they want to handle it. I think that Janelle has some sort of plan, and I know that I do as well. And none of us are talking to each other because none of us trust each other.
You could feel the tension the moment the cameras turned off. The house was quiet, the lights dimmed, and yet something was simmering beneath the surface. Cody sat slouched on the couch, eyes heavy, shoulders sagging like the weight of decades had finally caught up to him. And then it happened. Words whispered so softly, they might have gone unnoticed if not for a mic still recording. "This whole thing is disgusting," he muttered, almost to himself. But what he said next would shake the very foundation of his family. Across the room, Robyn stiffened, arms folded, her face unreadable. That voice, usually calm, cut through the silence, sharper than any argument could. "What did you just say?" she asked, and you could feel the air crack between them. It wasn't yelling, but the intensity of that moment made it clear nothing would ever be the same. Behind the polite smiles, the carefully curated family scenes, the loyalty and love everyone saw on camera, a storm was quietly building. And the wives? They weren't talking. Christine, Janelle, Meri, all holding their own private plans, their own quiet suspicions. No one trusted each other, and for years they had played their parts perfectly, hiding doubts behind nods and polite conversation. But now, the illusion was slipping. The perfect picture of family life that the cameras captured, it was only skin deep. The real story was happening behind closed doors, unguarded, unfiltered. Have you ever wondered what happens when loyalty isn't enough? When the masks people wear finally crack and the truth sneaks out, uninvited? This was that moment. The power dynamics, the control, the emotional games, all of it was laid bare in whispers, glances, and the smallest slip of the tongue. One confession, one private exchange, was about to set off a chain reaction that would reach every corner of this household. And as Cody's words hung in the air, the tension wasn't just between him and Robyn. It stretched across the entire family, silently pulling at old wounds and unresolved grudges. No one knew how far it would go, or what secrets would be revealed next. But one thing was certain, nothing in this house would ever feel safe or familiar again. And what came next would leave every wife forced to confront what they had tolerated for far too long. Before we dive into today, let's rewind a bit. The last episode left everyone on edge. Cody's silence, Robyn's subtle manipulations, and the lingering tension between the wives had created this fragile balance that could snap at any second. Janelle was quietly holding on, trying to keep the peace while quietly questioning everything. Christine, sharp as ever, had pulled back, observing from the sidelines, waiting for the cracks to show. And Meri, she felt like she was walking on eggshells in her own home, watching loyalties shift like sand under her feet. Trust was in short supply. No one was fully honest with each other, and everyone knew it. The cameras captured smiles and polite conversations, but behind closed doors, the emotional undercurrents were undeniable. The wives weren't just competing for Cody's attention, they were managing each other, navigating subtle slights, and questioning what had kept them together for so long. And honestly, who could blame them? If you've ever been stuck in a situation where everyone has an agenda, you know exactly what that feels like. It's exhausting. Even the kids were noticing the tension, though they weren't saying much. The household had become this strange mix of duty, resentment, and half-truths. Everyone was playing a part, and no one wanted to be the one to break the script. And yet, the cracks were everywhere. You could see them in glances, in moments of silence that lasted too long, and in small, loaded comments that carried more meaning than any formal conversation. So here we are today, stepping back into the chaos. The cameras roll, but the real story is behind the scenes, small confessions, sharp observations, and the quiet realization that some masks are about to slip. Each wife is carrying her own strategy, her own truths, and her own grudges. And you just know that when these collide, the fallout will be something none of them, or we as viewers, will see coming. Wait until you see who cracks first and what is said when no one thinks anyone is listening. The next moments will change everything, and nothing about this family will ever feel safe again. Robyn's world is a careful balancing act. On camera, she's the loyal, grieving wife, always composed, always performing. She smiles when cameras roll, wipes a tear when it's expected, and comforts Cody like she's the only one who truly understands him. But behind closed doors, it's a different story. She's calculating, sharp, and aware of every move the other wives make. Every glance, every word, every small hesitation, it all gets filed away. She's quietly consolidating power, making sure she stays at the center while the rest orbit around her. Cody, for his part, remains the enigma. Emotionally detached, distant, yet fully aware of the currents swirling in his household. He doesn't raise his voice, but his presence commands attention. Silence has always been his weapon. A cold glance, a measured pause, a carefully chosen word can make or break a mood. And Robyn knows it. She plays to it, bending situations in her favor without ever seeming aggressive. Their dynamic is a dance. One with steps neither wants to misstep, but both know missteps are inevitable. And then there are the small, unguarded moments that nobody else sees. In the living room, Cody leans back on the couch, voice low and tired. The way we function, it's exhausting, he mutters. Robyn arches an eyebrow, arms crossed, not missing a beat. Exhausting for who? She asks, a hint of steel in her tone. He doesn't answer directly, only letting his gaze linger, a silent accusation. You can feel the tension as if you're in the room, watching a private battle play out in inches. These aren't just disagreements. They're microcosms of control and manipulation. Every word carries weight. Every gesture a subtle message. And while the cameras capture the surface, the real story is elsewhere, in whispered complaints, in rolling eyes, in the careful way Robyn navigates Cody's moods. But here's the thing. Those private moments aren't staying private. Something small, something unguarded, is about to slip through. A confession, a hint of disdain, a fragment of truth that could shatter the careful equilibrium Robyn has built. And once it starts, nothing in the house will be the same. The real drama is about to break free. It started with a whisper nobody expected. A mic left on, a conversation meant to vanish with the evening, captured everything. Cody's exhaustion was obvious, but what came next hit differently. Robyn's voice, private and unguarded, cut through the room. Janelle acts like she's holding the family together, and Meri, she's like a tragic ghost, she said. Each word sharp, deliberate, impossible to ignore. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was surgical. Every observation, every judgment, landed like a weight on the wives who had long endured in silence. And when the audio found its way to Janelle and Meri, the shock was immediate. Janelle, always the rational one, leaned back, stunned but not surprised. She'd felt the patterns for years, seen the subtle power plays, and now the words confirmed it. Meri read the transcript like a verdict, each phrase slicing through her long-held hope that loyalty mattered. Christine's reaction was quieter, but no less potent. She felt validation, a confirmation that her instincts had been right all along. The fade was cracking, and every wife could feel it. Trust had been weaponized, and now the private truths were escaping, unfiltered, undeniable. And as the wives processed what had been said, a new tension filled the air. The room wasn't just quiet, it was waiting for the moment when the next confession would emerge, the one that could ignite everything. Because this leak was only the beginning. Something bigger, something none of them saw coming, was ready to explode. The words lingered long after the recording stopped. Janelle sat in her kitchen, the transcript on the counter, and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for decades. It was never about love, she murmured to herself. It was about control. Quiet grief, mixed with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. Every small sacrifice, every overlooked moment, suddenly made sense. The loyalty she had offered so freely had been weaponized against her. Meri, in her own space, felt a different fire. Betrayal had always been familiar, but hearing it spoken aloud by Robyn cut deeper. She traced the lines of the transcript, her fingers shaking, but there was no breaking, only awakening. "I'm not a ghost," she whispered to herself, her voice calm but firm. For the first time, she realized survival didn't mean silence. It meant claiming her presence, her worth, her identity. Even Christine, observing from a distance, felt the validation ripple through her. Years of careful observation, of seeing the subtle manipulations, suddenly had proof. The fade had crumbled, leaving raw, exposed truths behind. The emotional fallout wasn't dramatic in the traditional sense. There were no shouting matches, no immediate confrontations. It was quieter, deeper, and more powerful. Each wife began to reclaim agency, to step out of the invisible systems that had kept them under control. They were no longer players in someone else's story. They were writing their own. But this was only the beginning. The tension had shifted, and the balance of power had already started to wobble. What comes next will test their resolve in ways they never imagined. And nothing in the household will feel stable again. Cody has always ruled with quiet authority. Not with loud words, but with absence, with pauses, with the weight of expectation. For years, the wives moved carefully, gauging his moods, calculating each step to avoid missteps. Control had always been subtle, but absolute. But now, that control is slipping. The private confessions, the unguarded voices, the subtle recognition by the other wives, it all chips away at the walls he built. Janelle doesn't wait for permission anymore. Meri doesn't shrink in the corners hoping for approval. And even Christine, who has mostly stayed apart, is no longer naive to the patterns that govern the household. Each one asserts herself in small, deliberate ways. And with each assertion, Cody's influence weakens. In quiet moments, he feels it. Leaning back in his chair, eyes unfocused, he mutters to himself about the chaos creeping into the home. The conversations he once ignored or subtly steered now swirl beyond his control. A glance from Robyn, a deliberate comment from Janelle, a shared understanding between Christine and Meri, all of it undermines the authority he has clung to for decades. Small confrontations amplify the effect. A casual remark about fairness becomes a tense stare down. An observation meant to pass unnoticed lands like a spark on dry wood. Cody watches the wives navigating life without waiting for him, without seeking his approval, and it unsettles him more than any argument ever could. He's no longer the axis around which the household spins, and it's not anger or outrage he feels, it's detachment, exhaustion, the realization that years of controlling silence and expectation won't bind them anymore. The rules he set, the loyalty he assumed, the obedience he expected, all of it is fracturing. The shift is subtle, but irreversible. One by one, the wives are stepping out, claiming space, speaking truths, moving on. Cody's quiet empire, built on invisible strings, is losing tension, thread by thread. And once those strings snap, the hierarchy, the balance, and the illusion of control will never return. The house will never feel the same, and the family knows it. Janelle sits quietly in her living room, the echoes of years of endurance settling around her. Every calculated move she made, every time she swallowed her frustration or adjusted to the household's unspoken rules, now feels like a rehearsal for this moment of clarity. She doesn't rush to celebrate. She doesn't even speak aloud at first. She just breathes, noticing how heavy the silence feels and how freeing it is. Meri, miles away, experiences a similar awakening. For years, she tolerated invisibility, quietly filling spaces no one acknowledged. But now, holding the transcript in her hands, she feels something shift inside. The betrayal cuts, yes, but beneath it, a spark ignites. I stayed too long, she whispers to herself, calm but resolute. I mattered. I still matter. There's no dramatics, no tears for show, just the raw power of recognizing her own worth. Both women begin reclaiming agency in ways subtle but undeniable. Janelle sends a message to Christine, a simple acknowledgement of shared truth. And for the first time in years, she doesn't anticipate the response. She trusts herself. Meri makes choices that reflect her independence, no longer waiting for permission, no longer tethered to someone else's expectations. The silence they once endured becomes a canvas for empowerment. The tension is still alive. Every glance, every offhand remark in the family circles now carries new weight. The household's equilibrium has shifted, and Cody's detachment only highlights how far the wives have come. Robyn notices too, and her mask slips ever so slightly, revealing the strain of maintaining control against women who no longer need her approval. And yet, liberation isn't neat or complete. There's a simmering question. How will the remaining secrets, the unspoken confessions, reshape the family? What comes next could change perceptions, even for fans who thought they understood the dynamics. Because Janelle and Meri have stepped into clarity, but the house is far from settled. And when the next revelation hits, it will challenge not just loyalties inside the home, but assumptions across the audience, leaving everyone wondering who will rise and who will finally fall. The moment the clip hit the internet, chaos erupted. Fans weren't speculating anymore, they were listening, dissecting every word and dissecting every gesture. Reddit threads lit up with timestamps. Instagram reels looped snippets, and YouTube comments flooded with outrage and disbelief. Robyn's carefully curated image cracked in real time, and viewers couldn't look away. The power dynamic inside the house shifted overnight. Janelle and Meri no longer needed subtle gestures to assert themselves. The public now held a mirror to the household's truth. Cody's silence, once a tool of control, only amplified the disruption. Suddenly, the balance of authority wasn't determined by private manipulation or emotional obligation. The audience had a voice, and it was shaping the story. Every fan reaction added weight to the household tension. Did she really just say that? Became a chorus online, and the wives knew those words were being replayed, scrutinized, and shared. Social media wasn't just gossip. It was a spotlight, exposing cracks the family could no longer ignore. How would the household handle the fallout behind closed doors? Would private grievances finally surface? Or would they continue behind a mask of calm? The questions linger, almost unbearable in their intensity. Because one thing is certain, nothing in the family will feel stable again. The public has weighed in, loyalties are being questioned, and the next confrontation is coming. Fans might think they've seen it all, but the truth has a way of pushing the boundaries, and what happens next inside the house will leave everyone shocked, wondering who will hold their ground and who will finally break. The air in the house feels heavier than usual. Janelle enters the room with a calm firmness that belies years of quiet endurance. Meri follows, steady but resolute. Robyn is already there, arms folded, eyes guarded, sensing the shift before it even arrives. The tension is almost tangible, a pulse in the room that won't stop. You don't get to cry and play the victim while ridiculing us behind closed doors, Janelle says, voice steady, cutting through the silence. Her words hang like a weight, impossible to ignore. Robyn's eyes widen slightly, her mask faltering. For the first time, she doesn't have a rehearsed response. Meri's voice joins, quiet but sharp. You called me desperate, like I wouldn't find out. Say it to my face now. There's no tremor in her words, just clarity and resolve. The years of being overlooked, minimized, and erased have led to this moment. She isn't pleading. She isn't begging. She's claiming her space. Robyn falters, stumbling over a weak excuse. But Janelle doesn't pause. We've endured. We've stayed silent. we've sacrificed, and you acted like the crown was yours alone. Each word lands like a hammer. The silence between sentences is loaded, giving space for reflection, for the wives to see themselves standing taller than they have in decades. Robyn's defenses crumble, but not fully. Her tears now are unguarded, uncalculated, a mix of disbelief and isolation. She realizes her control isn't just slipping, it's gone. Cody isn't here to shield her, and the wives aren't the same people they were years ago. And yet, the confrontation doesn't resolve neatly. There are no apologies, no reconciliations, just a reckoning. A subtle but undeniable shift in the family hierarchy. Janelle and Meri have spoken truths that can't be unsaid. Robyn is left facing her choices and their consequences alone. Outside, the quiet hum of the house belies the storm that has just broken inside. The fallout will ripple through every interaction, every conversation, every decision. The balance of power has shifted, and the family will never feel the same. The question now lingers: how will the remaining relationships endure? And who will rise in this new order? The house is quieter now, but the echoes of confrontation linger. Words once hidden behind cameras and polite smiles have surfaced. And nothing will ever feel the same. Betrayal, manipulation, and the fragile illusion of control have all been exposed. Janelle and Meri stand taller, finally claiming the space that was denied to them for years. They aren't just wives anymore. They are witnesses, survivors, and their voices demand to be heard. Robyn sits alone, her carefully constructed image cracked. Tears come, not in performance, but in disbelief. She faces the consequences of her words and actions, realizing that control isn't something you can demand, it's something that can vanish in an instant. Cody watches, detached, quietly reckoning with the collapse of the household he once thought he commanded. His authority, built on silence and expectation, has eroded under the weight of truth and courage. Christine's presence lingers like a silent force. She observes, knowing the sacrifices and loyalty she has offered were real, and seeing how the private confessions have shifted everything. The wives' personal journeys, years of endurance, compromise, and quiet suffering have culminated in this moment of clarity and liberation. And now the audience sits with the fallout. Would you have stayed in that household knowing what was really happening? Who do you think was truly loyal? Every choice, every hidden word, every act of endurance carries weight, and it's impossible not to reflect on what loyalty, love, and survival really mean in this family. The tension isn't over. The cracks have widened, and the next chapter promises even more emotional reckonings, confrontations, and revelations. Relationships will be tested, alliances will be questioned, and the household's fragile balance will be pushed further than ever before. For now, the wives have spoken their truths. The masks have slipped. The performances are over. What remains is raw, unfiltered, and profoundly human. But the story isn't finished, and the next time we see them, nothing will be as it once was. So tell me, if you were in their shoes, would you have stayed? Who would you have trusted? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because the story is far from over, and the next revelations are going to leave everyone stunned.